And you guys can tell me if you can see the slideshow in full screen. Can you?
I see a little. Yeah, I see it. It's perfect.
Okay. Okay, got it. So, yeah, I believe the recording has started now.
Yes.
This is Be a Product Hero. This is my talk, my first talk, and hopefully the first of many talks with the collective studio. So, I am Dan Patrick Aquino, or Dan Aquino. I am Product and Brand Design Manager at Sevron. I am also an Adobe Community Expert, Certified Professional in Visual Design, Creative Educator, and so on. I have taken my postgraduate in corporate communications and strategic project management. So a lot of the things that I will be discussing today are going to have touch points with project management as well. I have also taken my advanced diploma in UI UX design and executive diploma in design thinking. So yeah, most of the things that I will be discussing today are, as I mentioned to Melanie the first time we had a chat. These are topics that are not going to make you the best UI UX designer in the room, but they are going to make you immensely effective in doing your work, especially if you are working within the corporate setup. So yeah, let's get right on to it. So first things first, we have to define what a UI UX designer is, and we have different words for them. This is, of course, depending on the industry, depending on the company, depending on the organization that you will be joining. So some people would call them information architects, product designers. I actually quite like information architect. It sounds a little bit fancy. And then you have product designer, software designer, UI architect. But yeah, most of these roles are actually pointing towards UI UX designer. So a UI UX designer is a professional responsible for crafting user interfaces, user experiences in both digital and physical products, focusing on user satisfaction and usability. You can see there I have highlighted some emphasis points on products, user satisfaction, and usability. So, well, basically, that's what UI and UX means. It, so it's more on the user-centric side. Definitely, this definition is dynamic and varies depending on the company organization, culture, industry, and project nature. So you will be able to see other organizations and companies, for example, who have a slightly different definition for what a UI UX designer is. But at the end of the day, it's more about creating user-centric experiences and satisfaction with digital and physical products. But for the sake of this talk, we'll be talking more on digital products because that is where most of us are currently working in. So, since product design or UI UX design focuses on the product and the user, we can see here a diagram where the product is right in the middle, and you can see the different stakeholders. For example, within an organization. So the stakeholders that are mostly tied into the product are the design and development because, well, basically these two departments or two teams are going to be responsible in bringing about the product. And then you have the sales, marketing, research, data analytics, customer service, finance, operations management, business development, and some other companies. They will have other stakeholders, right, to um, to the product design process. And then we can see here the UI UX design process. So it shows this quite linear. This is an oversimplification actually of the process. Later on, I will be showing you how the process looks like in actuality. But this is an oversimplification. What I mean to show here is that we are putting goals all throughout the process, right? So it's not just having a goal at the end of the process. It is having goals all throughout the process because the UI UX design process is an iterative process. Okay. Now I will be expounding more on that later on, but this is how we should look at the design process. It has a lot of goals. It has a lot of milestones in between. And then we see here a little bit broken down, a little bit in depth view of what a UI UX design process is going to be. So you start with research. You have your UX research, customer survey. This is the part where you create user personas, and then you have the ideation, conceptualization, brainstorming, wireframing. This is where you make all of those user flows. This is where you make all of those huge diagrams that you will be showing to your bosses or your supervisors and such. And then once that is approved, you get into the production phase. And then the production phase is usually divided into different phases. So you can see here production phase A, production phase B. Sometimes you would have production phase C, D, E, and so on. Once your production phase is done, you go to user testing. This is a very, very important part of the design process. So this is where you would be testing your prototype, you will be having analysis, you would be having parameters, you would be inviting customers or personas to check out the prototype and try it out themselves, and then they will be giving their review and feedback. Once everything is all ironed out and all accomplished, that's the only time that you will be handing it out to development. So, handing it out to development, of course, involves documentation, collaboration, a lot of meetings, a lot of communication, quality assurance, testing, and so on. And it looks a little bit simple. It looks quite simple. Looking at this here, we only have actually 6 items on the board. But the UI UX design process is not a linear process. It is a circular process. It is a process that goes in different cycles, if you get what I mean. So, yeah. Now, let's see what happens if you get mistakes in between. So, you see different loop backs, you see different flow backs within the process. You see if there is a mistake in the ideation, you would go back to research. If there's a mistake in production, you would go back to ideation and research. If there's a mistake in user testing, you would go back to the production phase because you would need to implement all of those reviews and feedbacks. And then you would most likely go back into the ideation phase if there are a lot of mistakes within the final prototype that you have created. And then usually it loops back again into the research. So you can see here it's a very, very tedious process, and it can be a very tedious process, but it's going to be an even more tedious process if you don't really do these. So the thing is that this is the reason why we should put milestones in between on and all throughout the design process. We should put different milestones so that we can make sure that the draft or the prototype, the final prototype that we will be creating, are actually up to par with our objectives and our standards, so that we don't really need to loop back or to go back that much. But yeah, this is how things are done. Usually, I'm not saying this is how things are done in all companies, but usually this is how things are done, especially in terms of UI UX design. Now let's go back to the more calm version of the UI UX design process. So you see, research, ideation, production, testing, and handover. All of these things are actually rooted in the design thinking process. And I'm sure most UI UX designers um, already know the design thinking process, but for the sake of those who don't know, the design thinking process is a 5 step process that is typically employed to in the process of creating products or designing products, right? That's why it's called design thinking, basically. So yeah, the first part of it is empathize, and then you have define. Empathize would be the part where you do your research because you are basically empathizing with what your users are, with what problems your users have. So the goal of your product is to address all of these concerns or all of these problems. So that's the empathize part. And then define would be defining the goals, defining the targets. What solutions are you going to be providing with the product that you will be creating? And then your ideate. phase is where you do your conceptualization, you do your diagramming, you do your wireframing and such. Prototyping is, of course, the part where you do bulk of the designing stuff. This is where you do it on Figma, you do it on Adobe XD. This is where you would be creating all the assets, all the visual side of it, all the user experience side of it, into creating the final draft prototype that then goes into testing, which is the last part of the design thinking process. When you adapt this design thinking process and you translate it to the UI UX design process that I've shown earlier. Afterwards, after the testing part and when everything else is done, that's when you do the development handover. So you see here, design thinking is a non-linear process. So like the one that I showed you earlier, the ugly process diagram, this one also has a lot of loopbacks, a lot of flowbacks, a lot of feedback cycles and such. And it's very important to have those. Um, so let's see. Why is it important to have feedback loops and cycles? So we have the iterative improvement. That's what we gain by having feedback loops. So we do continuous feedback loops to enable product designers to identify and rectify issues early, because it's easier to create all of these revisions and improvements early on in the design stage than to wait until you've created the entire system before you do a review. So it's this feedback loop. They ensure iterative improvement through revising as soon as necessary. And then, of course, you have reduced cost and delays. Some prototype projects, some product design projects, product prototypes take several months for you to be able to create, especially if we are thinking about maybe a web app or maybe something that has a little more technical. For example, in my current job, we create applications that are geared towards helping businesses to be compliant with health and safety standards. So those things require a lot of research. Those things are highly technical. These things actually have a list of different chemicals in them, a list of different hazardous chemicals, a list of different codes and stuff like that. And if you think about it, it's going to take you a very, very long time for you to be able to create an entire system. So you need feedback loops and cycles for you to be able to make sure that the things that you are creating for the prototype are right on track. Otherwise, you would have worked on something for 3 months, 4 months, for example, only to know by the end of the project that you have been working on the wrong stuff. Actually. So it's very important to have feedback loops and cycles for reduced cost and delays. And then finally, of course, you have your user and stakeholder satisfaction. So incorporating feedback from various stages ensures that the final product aligns closely with user and stakeholder expectations, the expectations of the upper management, the expectations of your user personas, resulting in higher satisfaction and the project success. So part of having design feedback loops and design cycles is having design documentation. When we say design documentations, we mean case studies, guidelines, wireframes, diagrams, turnover records for cohesion, communication, and collaboration in digital projects with stakeholders. So yeah, one of the things that are mentioned in this definition is cohesion and communication and collaboration. So, design documentation is really, really important in collaborating with other teams, especially if you are handing over to the development, you are taking in insights from the marketing, sales, and marketing department, for example. You need all of these design documentations so that you can get back to it at a later date and review if there are things that you need to review. Of course, you do design documentation also for clarity and consistency. It serves as a detailed reference, providing designers with clear guidelines and specifications. Not only designers, but actually the developers as well, because they will be needing all of these details. They will be needing all the hex codes, for example, that you have used in your design. They will be needing all the SVG codes. They will be needing all the assets, all the visual assets, for example. So you need design documentation. And like I said, collaboration and communication. Because documentation facilitates effective communication among team members, stakeholders, and developers. At some point in my company, we also employed development agencies. So we would create the prototype and then we would hand it over to a different company, to an outside company, development agency, for them to, well, build the whole thing. So yeah, it's very important to have design documentation if you are doing those. And of course, as an individual UI UX designer or a multimedia designer for that matter, it's also very important to have design documentation because it basically just showcases the your process as a professional in the field. So that's why we have Behance, for example. We have Dribble. We have the different. We have our personal sites where where we basically document, where we basically upload the things that we have created in the past. So yeah, that's part of design documentation. So if you guys want to read more about design documentation, design case studies, you may read this article that I published on medium.com. So I will be later after this talk, I will be sending my links so that you can check it out and read it out. So this article has also been republished by the UX Bootcamp. So yeah, you guys can check it out later. So those are that's design documentation and design case studies. Now we already mentioned collaboration, and in actuality, as a UI UX designer, most of the time collaboration means meetings, and meetings are actually ideation, consultations, reviews, workshops, critiques, evaluations, progress report. But collaboration is less about meetings, but more about communication. Um, it's important to communicate because uh, that's how you start the collaboration with other teams. And it's very important as a UI UX designer, like I showed you earlier, in the product diagram, the designers and developers are not the only people, are not the only stakeholders that have a say or that have insights towards the product. So you have all of those: business development, sales, customer service, customer success, marketing. Those things are, or those departments, those stakeholders are going to have a say into the product. So it's not just you, it's not just a designer, it's not just the developer. And for you to be able to collaborate with all of these other stakeholders, communication is very, very important. So just a few insights. Of course, these are pretty much a given already, and most of you guys already know about these things. So on meetings, pay attention to attendees as they share their insights. Don't be afraid to ask questions because basically that's what consultations are for. That's what meetings are for. Be open and receptive to opposing points of views. And I swear there are a lot of opposing points of views. There are a lot of arguments. Excuse me. There are a lot of arguments when it comes to meetings um, pertaining to the product. So you have your marketing department basically telling you to put as many logos as possible, as many branding elements as possible into the prototype, for example. So, for example, the marketing team would want you to add as many pop-ups to promote the product, to promote the different features. They want to put all of these pop-ups within the system. And then you have the development team who basically just wants to strip down your prototype into the most basic, po- uh, most basic, most naked possible version of it. So there will be a lot of opposing points of view. There will be a lot of arguments. There will be a lot of back and forths with these kinds of sessions. So yeah, like I said earlier, the design and the development teams are not the only teams that have a say about the product. You also have the data analytics, research. You have your sales, customer service, customer success, marketing, finance, of course. So yeah, when do these meetings or consultations happen? So they happen at the beginning of a project when teams evaluate designs against user goals, heuristics, or principles to shape the new design direction. They also happen at important milestones of iterative design process. Critique workshops help ensure designs are on track with users' needs, principles, or other measurable criteria. So the keyword here is heuristics. Heuristics are guidelines, principles, or parameters to evaluate the usability and UX of a digital product or interface. You might have a different other companies might have a different term for this one. Um, our company actually has a different term for this one, but based on the my UI UX education, this is what they call it in the academe heuristics. So these are sets of parameters as shown here. You can see usability of system status, match between system and real world, user control and freedom, consistency, aesthetic and minimalistic design, and so on. Why is it important for you to have a list of all these heuristics while having a meeting with all of these people, all of these stakeholders? Where it's important because this is going to be your outline basically on the things that you will be responding to them. Like for example, if the marketing team tells you to add 100 pop-ups within the system, within the prototype, then maybe you can clap back at them by telling them that it's going to compromise usability heuristics. It's going to compromise usability of system status, or it's going to compromise user control and freedom. Because if you have 100 pop-ups in the system, then you can no longer use the system that well. And then that's the same thing with the development team, for example. If they want to strip it down to the most basic version as possible, then you can tell them that, oh, it's going to compromise our aesthetic and minimalistic design heuristic. These are parameters that you should always stick to. And these 10 items are not the only items, actually. You have your usability heuristics, you have your maybe interaction heuristics, you probably have parameters on different aspects of the design. So, yeah. But it's very important to have this list. This is, of course, going to depend on the objectives of the project. So, yeah, I would really recommend for you guys to maybe take a screenshot or um, list down all of these things because this is going to be very, very important in doing your job. And then going back to collaboration and doing meetings and everything, you have your best practices, so maintaining transparent communication to convey design intentions. It's very important to do clear communication. That's the first thing of collaboration, as I said earlier. And then collaboration sessions, regular meetings and workshops. I know it's very draggy and it's very draining to have 4 hour meetings, for example, about a single topic. And then you have different teams and departments all having a conversation about it all at the same time. It's going to drain you a lot. But it's a very, very tedious and but a very, very important part of the UI UX design process. And then you have your feedback integration, of course. So actively gather feedback and integrate insights from all teams to refine the design and meet user and market needs. You can at the end of the day you can't really deflect 100% of the things that the marketing team and the development team and the other teams are going to be giving towards the design of the product because like I said, and I will keep on saying this, the design and development team are not the only teams that have a say about the product. All of these other stakeholders also have a say with the product. So those are your collaboration practices. And since we are actually constrained by time, I've made this lecture quite quick. So that's basically the end of our topic for today. I would also like to take this opportunity to promote Adobe Express. So all the features you need to create stunning content in no time. You guys know about Adobe Express. It has a lot of templates. It just basically hastens your graphic design, visual design, and multimedia process. So if you need something to, if you need a visual that you need to put into your prototype, for example, you can use Adobe Express. It's going to hasten your process. There are a lot of great templates out there. They have text to image generation, AI generation. They You can edit your videos here. You can edit mock-ups of your product. So yeah, it's Adobe Express. Go check it out, guys. And then UXL. This is the first time that I will be promoting UXL. I've been a member of UXL for about a year now, and most of the things that I know about UI UX design, well, I wouldn't say most, but maybe about 30% of the things that I know about UI UX design, I've actually taken from UXL. It's a very, very insightful learning platform for UI UX designers, especially for beginners. This is a like I hope when I was starting in the UI UX design industry, this is going to be very, very helpful for me at that time. And well, it still is because they have a lot of courses, they have a lot of bite-sized lessons, they have a lot of certifications. You have your UX researcher certification, you have your product designer certification. Go check it out, guys. There are a lot of courses that are going to be very, very, very immensely helpful to you. And if you wish to join on a pro subscription yearly basis, you can join in with my link at 25% discount. Um, but of course, if you just want to check it out without spending a dime, you can do so because it's some of the lessons, some of the courses are actually free. So go ahead, check it out, guys. And that's it. Thank you. I'm now open for your questions or comments or feedback if there are any. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Dan. And by the way, Dan, if you open up the text chat window, it's right next to the living room name. So if you hover over it, you can click on the icon, and you could actually drop in the links there. I would like to also see and
Oh
also
yeah,
check
yeah,
out the article that you posted on Medium. That'd be really interesting. And also share the
yeah,
links
yeah.
that you have for your special offers. I'm pretty sure our members will enjoy it. Okay, so Stephen Ho is typing something. So while they're typing something, I have
Mhm.
a few questions just to help get the ball rolling. Um, so, um, so when it comes to the whole feedback repetition cycle of design thinking and other design methodologies, has it ever happened in your company where you're just kind of constantly stuck in a loop and you can't break out of it?
Oh yeah, there will be a lot of standstills actually. So because sometimes there are a lot of roadblocks actually. Like for example, you cannot really proceed without the approval of the main stakeholder, for example, or the main approving body. So in our case, it's the CIO or the Chief Innovation Officer, right? So his job is to approve everything, every single part or every single portion of the project before we can move on to the next. And sometimes it's just really difficult to get their approval. They have a very busy schedule, so sometimes we would have to wait a week before we get that approval before we could go into the next stage. And then there are also other roadblocks, like for example, development constraints. Just recently, we are trying to integrate an AI technology within a web app that we are creating. But the problem is it's very difficult. It's on a development point of view. It's very difficult to integrate these AI tools into the system. There are a lot of problems regarding it. So we really had to sit down and think about it, strip it down, and it pains me. It really pains me when that happens. When you've created an entire system that you think is working really great, that
Mm.
you think is really really awesome,
Mm.
but then the development team is gonna say, "Oh shit, this isn't gonna work. This is going to be very very difficult to develop." So you have to sit down, you have to strip back, you have to go on meetings, you have to go on coordinations for a week. Yeah, those are samples of examples of different roadblocks, and it's very common. It's very common, and it's actually pretty easy to overcome as well. The thing is, you just need to you just need to have an open communication. For example, with your approving body, just have an open communication with them. Be relentless in what do you call this, in requesting meetings with them. It's going there's going to be a lot of meetings and all of these things. I hope I was able to answer your question.
Yeah, you did. It was excellent. Thank you. I think there's another person that's
Mm.
still typing up a response. So while they're doing that, oh yeah, by the way, if you also want to unmute your mic, if you find it easier to speak rather than to type, that's totally okay. Uh, okay, so we have a question. So the question is, how did you become comfortable with different people's styles of communication and being confident in asking some of those questions? So this is, I guess, regards to meetings and picking the heads of your
Yeah, yeah,
colleagues. Yeah.
yeah. So I have to be honest. When I was starting as a UI/UX designer, I was really apprehensive about voicing out my concerns. Like, I didn't really talk much in meetings, especially because I was a junior then, and I didn't really talk much. I was, somehow there was some kind of fear in me that I might say something stupid, and then everybody else is gonna judge me for that statement. Um, but later on, working as a UI UX designer, I've realized that it's communication and collaboration is really a huge part of the job. Um, I see a lot of UI UX designers on LinkedIn, on Behance, on Dribble. They create all of these great designs, these awesome designs where there are 3D elements that when you interact with these 3D elements, they are going to be turning and making all of these fabulous animation and such. The thing is, this is what we call pixel pushing. Pixel pushing is when someone is like being trigger happy with graphics and such. And the reason why I'm saying this is because like most of the time, these designers are not really collaborating with the development team, because if they are, then the development team would tell them that, oh, this is just not feasible. This design is just not feasible. So you can from that you can see uh, which designer is actually communicating with other teams or collaborating with other teams, and you can also see which designer is not collaborating with other teams. Now, going back to the question, how did you become comfortable with different people's styles of communicating? So as I am actually a Filipino, and I live in the Philippines, but the company that I'm currently working in is an international community. It's a company based in the UK, so there are a lot of British people out there. Um, and then there are a handful of Filipino employees as well. There at some point we had employees from Cambodia, employees from Singapore. So it's a multicultural community, and I feel like it's a great environment to hone your or to improve on your communication skills, because you will be compelled to actually understand them and to actually make your language as understandable as possible, because you guys are speaking different languages. And even if we say that you guys are all speaking in English, there are different ways of constructing your language, for example. So yeah, it's having a multicultural being in a multicultural environment is actually a great setup to hone. your communication skills, and that honing that communication skill is going to reflect on the way you collaborate with people, the way you talk in meetings, the way you talk in all of these consultations and reviews and such. So yeah, it's basically just a great environment.
Hopefully that answered their question. We'll wait for a response. But in the meantime, I also have to say, like, to respond to that question myself, um,
Hmm.
I think sometimes when it comes to being comfortable with something, it's very easy to be frightened when you're a junior, but then when you just continue
Yeah,
going to meetings and continue talking and speaking up, it starts to be less frightening. So I think with the confidence issue,
yeah,
it like goes away after you start to adjust to the role. And I've been in different corporate environments where team communication is very important, and definitely when I was a freelancer, I was accustomed to just doing my own work by myself and then having the marketing people talk for me. And then when I worked with another company as a freelancer, I thought, oh, I have to like start meetings. Like, I'm going to be so cringe. I'm so awful at it. But then once I got to understand that this is quite normal for the company and everyone's quite like friendly when you meet them, that it's not as scary as you think it is. So as soon as you like get over that fear, like the more you do it, the less scary it gets. That's all I have to say about it.
yeah. I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. And you will be able to see. Correct me here, Melanie, if you think different. But I feel like you will be able to see a designer that knows communication and that collaborates with other teams, and a designer who doesn't do that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the best communicators, like the people that I've worked with that I remember in my mind as being excellent communicators, they were really friendly, approachable, they explain things with reasons. So if you're talking to someone who isn't like a brick wall, so to speak, where if you have conflicts of ideas, they're not stuck in their ways, they're willing to listen to you and they respect you, I think that's a good environment to be in when you're talking to people like that. So yeah, like seeing people who cultivate that mindset of like being open to challenge and they're willing to like consider different opinions than their own, that's like a sign of like a good designer.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah. And yeah, so Stephen also says thank you. We both answered the question very well. Thank you. And we're glad that we helped. So I have another question. So this is more about setting success criteria. Um, So, when it comes to development teams and the research team, is everyone aligned and on board of what the success criteria is, or does it somewhat differ depending on like different things? I don't know, but like, have you ever like, do you know what the success criteria would be for some of the projects that you've worked on, and you know that it kind of worked for you? Like, how did you come to determine that in your company?
Yeah. So I can't really speak with all companies. I'm sure other companies have a different way of doing this, but in my company, different stakeholders or different teams have different criteria or different parameters. Because they have different interests, right? For example, the development team would have a different set of criteria. Maybe uh, let's give an example. Maybe they would want the product to have the cleanest data that they can get, for example. So that's one of the criteria for the development team. And then for the marketing team, of course, they want it to be fabulous. For example, they want it to be visually pleasing as possible. They want it to be as marketable as possible because they are basically the marketing team. So those are their parameters. And then the product design team and the product research team also have different criteria. So the thing is, it can really go chaotic because all of these criteria might clash with one another. That's why but the product is right in the middle of it, and I feel like it's first and foremost the product designer's job to create a harmony within all of these criteria. For me, I don't really need to get an exact list of the criteria from the marketing team, for example, or the criteria from the development team. I don't really need to get an exact list. Usually that job goes to the upper management or goes to the director of IT, for example, or the product head, product owner, whichever. So that task goes to those people, and then they would be either creating a list or they would communicate what they want to see in the product based on all of these other criteria all of these other stakeholders. So yeah, and these criterias are not being taken as Bible, especially in my organization. They are not being taken as Bible. For example, if I have a different way of doing things, for example, I would tell them, oh, I think this is going to be better, especially in all of those meeting sessions and such. That's a good opportunity actually to pick some things and add some things into all of these criteria. So it's not always a listed one. It's not always a listed document, but there are a lot of criteria and they vary depending on the stakeholders. I hope I was able to answer your question.
Yeah, you did, and thank you for that. I'm always curious to hear about how some companies differ because I've had some friends who are like senior designers and they feel a little bit
Melanie, are you
Oh,
there?
hello?
We can't hear you. Okay,
Yes?
okay, we can
Okay.
hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. I think my mic was on mute. There's like a physical button for mute on the mic, so I forgot to unclick it. Anyway, yeah, so I was gonna say, I have a few friends that are senior designers, and they always complain about how ununited their team is sometimes. So it can be chaotic when one department wants one set of goals that goes the opposite way, or sometimes
Yeah.
it's not aligned with other teams. But I recognize that, like every company, even the companies I've worked in as a graphic designer, they had the same kind of issues. But I am kind of curious
Yes, yes,
about.
we have.
I'm kind of curious about your design thinking certificate and how you applied design thinking at your role. Have you done that, and what kind of effect has it had on your company?
Yeah, I have actually. I have. I've taken my design thinking certification from Athena Global Education. It's a learning platform online, and yeah, it's a very insightful course. That's the first time that I've actually encountered design thinking. I mean, I've encountered design thinking when I was starting my career as a UIX designer. And when I saw this diploma in design thinking, I actually felt like this is going to be helpful to me. It's going to be very insightful. And it was. It actually is. Like I said earlier, the UIX design process that I've showed in my slides, that was derived from design thinking. Because well, design thinking is a tried and tested process. It's not a one size fits all process, but it's a tried and tested process that are employed by a lot of product designers, including Don Norman, for example, the author of Design of Everyday Things. If you guys know about that, so he's a leading UX expert. So yeah, um, there are a lot of principles and theories within the design thinking process that you can employ within your process. So this is something that you would do on a managerial level, something you would do on a project manager level if you are, for example, overseeing the entire UI UX design process. So yeah, and design thinking is also very insightful when it comes to especially on the empathy part. Because before I studied design thinking, I felt like I was creating a solution, and I well, definitely there is a research phase within the product design process. But it felt like it was all about me. It was all about me. It was all about how I would make a solution, how I would bring about a solution that's going to change the world, for example. Because that's how humans think. But then looking into the design thinking process, it's not actually about you. It's not actually about the designer, the developer. It's not about you. It's about the user. So design thinking is all about being user centric. So as long as your product addresses or solves the issues that that your users have, then you can say that your product is successful. And that's one of the major things that you can get from design thinking. Um, Definitely, like I said, design thinking is not a one size fits all. Probably 70% of 760 or 70% of product designers around the world employ design thinking, but some of them don't. Some of them would employ the double diamond uh, process. So that's a different process from design thinking. They do have a lot of similarities though, but it's a different process. And then some other product designers would employ different theories. They would employ different principles, different guidelines. So yeah, it's really I feel like my answer to this is going on a philosophical point of view now. But yeah, on a philosophical point of view, it's really important that you know take in all of these theories and then like create an amalgamation or create a mixture of them that serves your objectives. And basically that's what happened with our company because I was one of the pioneer UI UX design team members. So 5 years ago, the company didn't have a UI UX design team. It was like it was a development team that created everything. So if there was someone well versed in UI among them, it's this person who created that because front end developers can basically also do UI, but what they lacked was the UX part. And yeah, I was one of these pioneer people when the UI UX design team was created, and we were able to like get all of these theories together, create an amalgamation where we built a process that worked for us. It's just so happened that design thinking was a huge bulk of it.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for explaining that. I appreciate you explaining that. It is kind of exciting when you are like the only, not the only, but like one of the founding members that make changes in your organization, the way that you do work
Mm.
together, and also change and elevate your role. I'm kind of curious to know, like, how did that like, happen exactly? Like, how did you, like, get people on your team to embrace design thinking and UX UI? Like, how did that happen?
It was actually a joint effort uh, between the UI UX design team and the chief innovation officer. So our chief innovation officer is a crazy person. He's like probably one of the most creative people I know in the world, and he just he loves fostering or creating an atmosphere where people are free to go crazy. So yeah, and then he knows all about these things, all about designs. He knows all about design thinking, the double diamond, and then he basically was the one who told all of us to like, okay, I am giving you the freedom because basically you guys are the pioneer of this team. I am giving you the freedom to like create a process at work. And we were given the leeway to make mistakes. We were given the leg room to experiment. So I feel like we did experiment for probably almost a year, doing all of these different processes, different project management approaches and such. And I think it's a great asset to be in a company where they would give you that kind of freedom to experiment and try things out because yeah, that uh, uh, experience is the best teacher. So when you've experienced this sort of process and you've confirmed that this process works, then yeah, later on when you apply it to other projects, for example, you replicate that process, you will be a master of that process.
Yeah, that's one thing that I have to say is really kind of like refreshing and inspiring is that like I love working with small startups and small companies, for example, because if I'm
Yeah,
hired as a
yeah,
designer, there's more opportunity for me to change the way that we do work. And yeah, that can also be freeing in the sense that you're working with a small company, they don't have an established plan on how to do things, and you're working with a small enough team that has enough trust that you could change things.
yeah,
So you have a lot of creativity, a lot of
yeah,
room to make
totally.
mistakes, and a lot of room to improve as well. So you're really lucky to have that kind of experience because that's kind of like my favorite type
Yeah,
of environment to work in. But I understand that corporate,
yeah, yeah,
it
totally.
sometimes the system is the way that it is. You can't change it. It's going to be, talking to managers of managers of managers before you actually can talk to
Yeah,
someone
yeah,
who's really in charge that's going to make change. And then change is still
yeah,
fundamentally hard to do because there's just so many people who are kind of like maintaining the system the way that it is. So without
yeah,
getting
yeah.
into that, my thought process, because I could easily tangent and talk a lot, I'm going to move on to the next question, the last question, because it's about 10 p.m. now, my time, 10 a.m. your time. Wonderful. You're in the future. Anyway, so Stephen says, what new programs or design tools other than Figma would you say are being used that a junior designer should learn to use?
Oh, okay. So, for me, I started my UI UX career with Adobe XD. Um, because I've showed earlier, I'm an Adobe community expert, so I'm pretty loyal with Adobe. But now, well, Adobe bought out Figma, and then I started learning Figma. Well, I started learning Figma because Figma is like the leading UI UX design tool now. What new programs or design tools? I wouldn't say programs, specific programs or design tools, but I feel like Adobe Express and Adobe Firefly are really, really good assets to have, especially if you are, if you are looking into creating visual assets quickly, you are creating mock-ups. Because for me, my job in the company is not only focused on the creation of the product, creation of the prototypes, on the design of the prototypes. I am also tasked with, creating marketing materials for that product. That's why I'm called the product and brand design manager. Yeah, so it goes from product design and product marketing as well. And Adobe XD, I mean Adobe Firefly and Adobe Express have been really, really helpful to me in those processes. And other design tools, I also wouldn't call these tools, but Figma plugins are very, very important. And just recently, we have discovered the Anima plugin on Figma, where you can basically convert your Figma prototype into React JS. It is great. Yeah, it is great. It is great. And I sat down with the development team and I asked them because I don't really know how to code, guys. I know a little bit about HTML, a little bit about CSS, but I really don't know much about it. So we sat down with the development team, and then I showed them Anima, and then I've showed them the what do you call this, the sample React JS code, and then they said, "Oh wow, this is great because this actually covers 50% of the code that we need to do for the front end." So yeah, it's gonna be very helpful, and I feel like with the advancement of Anima and of other technologies, there will be other plugins and other tools out there that's gonna they are just gonna continue on improving, and they are continue on popping out of nowhere. And then maybe at some point in time in the future, maybe Anima can do the 100% of the front end. So all you have to do is to do the back end. So yeah, that's what we're hoping for it to do. What other design tools? I feel like those two, Anima, Adobe XD, Adobe Firefly, those things are have been really, really important to me. A junior designer should learn to use. You excel, definitely. I'm not saying this because I am an affiliate of UXL. I'm no. I'm saying this because UXL is really, really great in all of these, in teaching us with all the basics. With actually some of the stuff that I've shown earlier in my slides are taken from UXL. So if you guys loved what was shown earlier, you're gonna love UXL. There's just a lot of things that you can learn, especially a junior designer. There are a lot of things that a junior designer could learn from UXL, and like most of their courses are free, so go ahead, try them out.
Yeah, and don't worry, I'm not being paid by UXL, but I've seen it before, and I've done their little quizzes, and I thought it was so fun because it is
Yeah,
important to
yeah,
kind of train your brain, but also make it fun. Because like learning is laborious, but if it's
yeah.
so easy and quick to do, it'll make you want to do it. So definitely, if you want to like scrub up, like relearn some things about, elements of design and stuff like that, or build your vocabulary, then yeah, UXL is really good. I also want to
Thank you.
add to the question about
Mhm.
programs and software. I think plugins with Figma is a game changer because I didn't realize how slow and how wrong I was using Figma until I started to work with some of my mod team members. So they're helping me to redesign the TCS website. And yeah, there's all these different shortcuts that you could use within Figma that just makes your workflow easier. So if I'm kind of like a old school designer, so I usually use Adobe software as well, and I had been using it for so long, and it took me a while to actually get the grasp of like Sketch and Figma. But now that I'm using this software, I see how smart it is, and I realize the steps that I've been doing in Adobe is a little bit of a longer process, but with Figma, it's a little bit,
Mhm.
shorter and concise, especially with the plugins that they have, which are just made by third party developers. So you can find anything that you want. Um, Other
Yeah,
than that,
yeah,
when it
totally
comes
agree.
to freelance work, and maybe I could speak to this because I'm a freelancer, I've had clients that only work in, let's say, for example, Photoshop. And this is crazy. I've actually had, a client that said their development team will only take wireframes that are made in Photoshop, and Photoshop is like the least effective way of doing wireframes. But
Yeah,
like I
yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
find a way to navigate around it. So like sometimes on the job, you'll be asked to use software that you either don't like using or have to use. So also consider
Mm.
broadening your skill set. So if you're good at Figma, what if your client says, "Oh, can you work in Sketch?" Learn Sketch. Learn all the things. If you have to use
Yeah, yeah.
Protopie, for example, learn Protopie. But the good thing about some of this software is it's all kind of similar. So if you know Figma, you'll probably figure out Sketch. So if you've never used Sketch before, don't worry. When you start using Sketch for the new job, pretty much a lot of the things that you learn from Figma kind of already align. And same thing with using Adobe XD. I've used that on client projects before. And I'm new to Adobe XD, and it's pretty intuitive. So if you learn one type of software, you'd realize like, oh yeah, they're all kind of the same. So don't worry so much about like being an expert in all of it. Just try to like learn as much as you can, and learn some of the processes and the tiny differences between them. And if you have a job that requires you to use one software, like try to, respect their wishes and do your best job. Doesn't matter which software you use, just try to be your best.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I haven't tried the Sketch myself, but yeah, I've tried Adobe XD, Figma, Adobe Illustrator, Adobe Photoshop, some Suns 3D. So yeah, all of those things.
Absolutely. Hope that answered their question. So we're going to wrap things up now. It was a pleasure to have this conversation with you. And by the way, this event has been recorded, so if you're just joining us late and you want to know what's going on, what were we talking about, everything's going to be posted on our YouTube channel. So please follow us on our YouTube channel, and you'll definitely enjoy the video once it's launched. Other than that, I also do this just to say, if you want to show appreciation for what we do here, we kind of raise donations for keeping this community free and open for everyone. So if you're interested in donating to the Collective Studio and you get value from the types of events that we run, then please consider donating. So I'm gonna copy and paste our donation link for those of you that are not familiar. and I'm gonna put it into the chat. And there you go. So please consider donating to us any way that you can. Sorry, that's a long list of embeds, but there you go. Thank you very much, Dan, for doing this, and we hope that the next time it will be a greater and bigger turnout. But yes, thank you guys for all being here, and we appreciate it. Thank you. Bye bye. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Or good night. Or good morning. All right. See you.
See ya.